Hi, Herbert Lee here. Welcome to another series. This is the series, Do You Make These Mistakes Learning English? Watch the video till the very end. You're going to get some really valuable tips on how you can correct how you're learning English. How you learn English is very important. You may have been learning English for many, many years, but you haven't been doing it correctly, and that's slowing you down. So watch the entire video to get all the tips. Better still, watch the entire series of 7 to get all the tips. And then, the most important part is apply what you learn. Learn and do. Don't just watch the videos and say, hey, that's a nice idea. I might want to try that. Don't try. Actually do it. Also, do me a favor. After you've tried the technique, after you've used these tips to actually improve how you learn English, leave your comments in the comment section. I'd love to hear from you. And if you really find these videos useful, click on the subscribe button to make sure you get all the updates. Hi, welcome to session 2. Do you make these mistakes learning English? In this session, I want to give you 3 simple tips that will really help you master English fluency. Now, I've mentioned these before in other videos, but I've made a better version this time, so I think you'll enjoy this. Very easy. Tip number 1 is the translation loop. Again, I've talked about this before. Most of us have this idea, and we've had this habit of translation loop. That's where the idea goes into our ear, we hear it in English, we translate it to our native language, we process the question in our native language, then we process the answer in our native language, and then we retranslate it back into English, and out comes the answer. And usually the answer sounds kind of funny. Now, if you've used Google Translate, I know you know what I mean. It just does not sound like English. For a Chinese speaker, it sounds like Chinglish. For a Spanish-speaking speaker, it sounds like Spanglish. For a French-speaking speaker, it's called Franglish, because we've mixed our own native language with English. One thing you need to do if you want to begin eliminating your habit of the translation loop, get yourself an English to English dictionary. I highly recommend the Learner's Dictionary, particularly either a Longman's Learner's Dictionary or a Collins Learner's Dictionary, English to English. Then you will begin to stop that habit of translating to your native language. And the other reason that translation loop is killing you is you're not thinking in English. You're still thinking in your native language. And that will really hinder you from really becoming fluent in English. Because when you are fluent in English, you're thinking in English. Your vocabulary is in English. Your sentence structure is in English. Everything is in English. And you're doing it quickly. That's the key. The other thing with translation loop is it sounds funny. So actually people may not even understand what you say when you're using the translation loop because it sounds so close to your native language. Second tip, learn to be an effective listener. Now this really takes time. I said in a previous video, it takes you 2,500 to 3,000 hours of listening to a language. This doesn't mean going to listening class. This doesn't mean like watching a movie and not understanding everything for 2 hours until you're bored and you don't want to learn anymore. It means exposing yourself, listening to more and more language, English language. So this can be a podcast, this can be an audiobook, this can be watching short sections of a movie. And I recommend this, watch 10, 15 minutes of a movie, go back, replay it, 15 minutes again, like that. Listening will really improve your fluency. What's the other reason for that? When you were a baby, you spent 1.5 years listening. That's how you learned your vocabulary in your native language. That's how you learned to listen. And yes, that is actually how you learned how to speak. Because all that went in, when you needed to say it, you knew what to say because you already built up a library like tapes or recordings in your brain. And the last thing, the third simple tip is learn the correct vocabulary. One of the things that's really bad about English in school or English at night class is this. They teach you very formal vocabulary that you don't need and that you don't use in oral English. And the thing you need to listen for in spoken English, and the things you need to concentrate your learning efforts are phrasal verbs. A phrasal verb is a verb and a preposition. In English, we have 10,000 phrasal verbs. So don't try to memorize phrasal verbs. And don't get a dictionary of phrasal verbs and try to memorize it. It's not going to help you. What you need to do is listen in on some conversations and try to figure out what does that phrasal verb mean. Or jot it down in a notebook, not in front of whoever's speaking to you, but after you leave who you're speaking to. And then you jot it down, you look it up in your learner's dictionary, and you find out what the meaning is. You'll develop a bank of phrasal verbs. The other thing that's good is you should try to learn to guess what the meaning of the phrasal verb is during the conversation. In fact, this is the trick that native speakers use. They learn to guess the meaning based on the context, based on the meaning of the rest of the sentence. That's how they know all these phrasal verbs. And you say, gee, they must have a good memory. They haven't memorized all the phrasal verbs. They're just learning to guess better than you have. So you can learn that skill, learn to guess the meaning. And to improve your vocabulary, learn something called collocations. Collocations are common word pairs, words that are used all the time. So for example, you read in the newspaper, the bride wore a flowing gown, right? So even if it's a very short gown, the newspaper writer still says it's a flowing gown. So these are common expressions that are used in pairs for words. And they can be any kind of pairs, adjective, noun, verb and noun. There are many, many collocations in English. Again, you can learn common collocations by listening in on conversations. Don't always feel like you have to speak. Listening in on a conversation is a great way to improve your English fluency. In fact, I highly recommend it. Learn to be like a spy and listen to other people's conversation. When you get comfortable, then you can jump in. That's it for today. 3 simple tricks to improve your English fluency.